Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to Coffee and Grace. We took a break, but guess what? We decided to come back on a different night and in a different way. Welcome to our absolute first live stream, and we are beyond excited. We are beyond thrilled, and I could go on and on and on and on and on. So I am Dee Kendricks, for those who may be new to the family and to the coffee table, your host of Coffee and Grace. I am your culture strategist and your grace warrior and your morning sip host. Welcome to the table, our co-host for the summer series. Mr. Kendricks is back. Hey, Ossie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
We're live tonight.
Right. A little nervous, but
Stop
it'll go okay.
You're like a natural at this, a complete natural. Welcome to our co-host, because I don't know, I'm trying not to be completely distracted. So I don't know how many folks are logged on, who's logged on, or if anybody's logged on. We didn't really, this wasn't a super duper planned situation. We just decided to go live. And I can't ignore the fact that like my headband, like before going live, just decided to do its own thing. So if I decide to take it off tonight, y'all don't mind. All right. And for those who may only know him behind the curtain, tonight you'll still only know him behind the curtain. Ben has decided to help us out tonight. Ben is a critical part of the show. Ben is our executive engineer. Say hey, Ben.
Hello.
Hey. All right. So, guess what?
What?
Couple of things first.
Okay.
Before we dig in, because you know I'd be ready to dig in.
Right.
So number one, for all of you who listened and loved the hashtag self-love first, that was the first episode in the July Love and Marriage Summer Series.
Yes.
Thank you for loving it. Thank you for talking about how it's impacting you, shifting you, all the things. Those of you who haven't checked it out, check it out. You'll know what you're missing. The other thing that's up, Ossie, is the morning sip is now a go.
It's live.
It is live.
It happens.
We are a weekend.
Yes.
By the way. I found out a whole lot. Like, number one, that daily content is not for the faint of heart. So I'm glad I didn't commit to like every day of the week.
Right.
I also realized that folks are ready to level up in new ways that they have not leveled up before.
Yes.
And I'm here for it. And the morning sip is really about that. It is about every single person who is on the level up journey looking for partnership and fellowship on the journey to next. And my job is I am just your level up partner and helping you not accept or settle for anything less than your badass dreams, because that's what you deserve. Leveling up. Hashtag be your own superhero. Okay. So go check that out. In fact, there's a couple of episodes that dropped the last 2 days. You will not get a new morning sip tomorrow because we're here tonight. But we will be back, I think, Friday. So anyway, I'll talk to you online about that. How are you today?
You know, I'm good.
Are you good?
I'm relaxed. I'm ready.
Yeah?
I'm a little anxious.
Are you a little anxious?
But we'll get through this.
I know it. I'm going to pause for a minute. Like, I'm just curious. Do we have anybody out there in like chat land? No? Do we have folks dialed in and logged in?
Yes.
Ben,
Stephanie Lucas said that she is tuning in from the gym.
Oh, hey, Stephanie. Shout out to Stephanie and Tyrin. It's probably Tyrin, but don't tell him, don't be mad that I mispronounced his name. Hey there. I'm sure, is my mom on? I'm probably sure my mom's somewhere on there.
I'm sure she is.
And the family. Okay. Well, we'll come back to comments. We promise to keep coming back to comments tonight. So typically at this point, we do a bit about like what's brewing.
Right. What's brewing? Nothing.
Like nothing worth really talking about. Like, I don't know if people are busy living their lives and minding the business that pays them. Because they only, like, there's nothing. Like, normally, I'm all here for whatever the hot tea is and how we could be philosophical about it and overthink it. But, like, when I intentionally looked to see what we'd want to talk about, there was nothing. There's, like, Wendy Williams' normal shade.
Oh, yeah.
Nick Cannon is still taking on the role of Adam to populate the earth.
What is it, 7? So 7 is the number of completion and perfection, so maybe he's complete and has perfected this family.
Well, I hope 8 comes so he can have a new beginning and do some different stuff because, and I've seen these arguments about, well, he can afford to take care of his baby. Have we fallen that short in human responsibility and expectations in men and in humans, period, that being able to afford populating the earth justifies doing so?
I hope not.
Is that what y'all think? Do y'all feel that way? I don't feel that way. I feel like it for all of the up and coming individuals, I won't even say men, but boys, individuals.
Sure.
Who are looking at him for the areas of role model that he is, because he does have some areas that he is a significant role model.
Sure.
Right? They call him the hardest working man in entertainment, which is pretty interesting. I think that he sets this narrative that parenthood is a outside the house job that can be done, and only one parent is needed for a child to get a total experience.
Interesting.
And I would say that I think there's a ton of research that proves different. I mean, it proves that we can make it.
Right.
But I mean, but is that what we want to strive to? Anyway, right. I didn't even mean for this to be a hot topic. But anyway, so that's going on still. Right. And what else? Shikari still ain't going to the Olympics.
So disappointed. But, as she said, she's young. She's got lots of more races, and she'll be back stronger, faster, even faster. I mean, the girl is fast as hell right now.
I would agree.
So this and it's disheartening. The how she found out about her mom's death, and while there's no excuse relative to what makes you react any sort of way, the marijuana is legal in the state of Oregon.
Listen,
she didn't do anything illegal.
I wanted to do a whole lot more than weed out when I found out I had to bring home a bad report card.
Right,
and we're
smoking
like,
a joint or an edible,
and I do think that some of us are so casually judgmental with the, notion of, but she knew what she was messing up. No, obviously she doesn't, because most of us didn't at her age.
No.
And yes, one should know, what we have and possess. I'm 41 years old and I'm still recognizing what I should be grateful for every day. And this is not an excuse. I am glad that her PR folks were able to position her to give an authentic, I thought she was able to maintain authenticity while accepting. Now I just need her to stay offline. Like, I need her PR folks to lock all the passwords. She don't need to start clapping back, because there's been a little bit of clapbackery, and I don't want her to mess up what she got going on. That's what I do want to stop right now. Just go lock yourself up for like the next year or two, and we'll see you whenever the next Olympics
or just
hit.
Give the reins to someone to manage her social media platform.
Well, that's true, but I know that that's hard.
Yeah.
So here we are, still not talking about hot topics.
Right.
In good news, the political current administration is still refreshingly boring.
Snorefest.
I mean, for the most part, every now and then there's something to, kind of side eye Joe Robin Biden about, but Robinette actually is his middle name.
It's difficult if it's boring or in a good place, that meaning he came into office and saved a lot of us from this pandemic.
He really
in a
did.
Quiet way. Now, is he boring? Yes.
Well, let's not make this personal.
Good old Uncle Joe.
Uncle Joe is not himself boring. Okay. I'll have you know.
We can agree to disagree with that one.
Listen, I spent a good whatever number of years in the Delaware Valley, and I enjoyed talking to Uncle Joe. But I would say that, we can have a political conversation on another day. He gets heat for some things that, and in the Black community and in various communities, they feel like that he's not giving attention to, or there's some things out of order. I think if I were to pass on a note to his communications team and his chief strategist, it would be, I don't know what meetings right now are happening behind the scenes, but I would say peel the layers back for the people, because there's a ton that I recognize that is happening in this administration, but to the fairness of the general public who kind of go by sound bites and headline bites, you got to dig deep in these executive briefs and these bills to go into it. And so while I think and appreciate that, I think his communications team is doing a remarkably better stand-up and job of integrity than the past administration, I do think that sometimes more is more.
Agreed. I think our past administration lived out loud all over Twitter and social media. So this is, in many ways, going back to our maybe normal way of being a little silent in leadership.
Right.
Definitely leading.
Right. I don't remember ever growing up being excited about a press conference unless you knew something big was happening. And it dawned on me like maybe February or March when it was like going to be the first press conference. And I was like, when did I get this excited? And it was generally, I think it was like because every time there was one previously, you were just on the edge of your seat. But anyway, we spent way more time talking about non-hot topics. About cold brew.
Right.
Than I anticipated. So shall we dive into some love and some marriage?
We should. And let's see. Hey, TJ, our loving brother.
Hey, TJ.
Mike White, our cousin, who I lovingly still call Little Mike. But
hey, Mike.
So the secret is out.
Right.
Little Mike.
We got to stop tapping on the
But
table.
he's not so little, right.
There was no way for me to do that quietly. That's all. I'm going to fix this hair. Okay. I'm going to pull out my gel and my brush. We're doing everything. This is uncensored. So love and marriage.
Yep.
And this particular conversation is around loss and grief that's experienced through love and marriage. More so, how does it show up and impact, right? And not just marriage, which is why the topic is called love and marriage, because there's all different stages of relationship, number one, that's represented in the love. But even if we talk about non-familiar, non-platonic love relationships, there are different levels of commitment before marrying. And I think all of that is equally important in the journey of life. And so we wanted to talk about loss and grief because, to be honest with you, I personally think it is a topic that really is only discussed sorry, that distracted me. That's only discussed when it happens,
Sure.
per se.
Sure.
So, but you actually brought this topic up and wanted to discuss this as is one of our key topics now versus later. Mm-hmm. And other than the obvious recent tragic loss of us losing your mom, which made me also want to say, why do you want to talk about this now? Why would you want to pull this to the table? And so what prompted you to think that this was the right conversation for our community right now?
Sure. I think we have reached an age where a few of my friends and family have lost loved ones in their 40s. They've lost a parent or even a sibling, and sometimes a younger sibling. And it's such an interesting journey. Before I lost my father, I'd see it on social media and see it play out in the individual, and often wonder about what will I do when it happens to me.
Yeah. I think I remember going through my 20s and 30s, and people losing their parents felt so far away,
Sure.
right? And I think the interesting dynamic and difference between you and I is I've had my share of loss, right? In a ton of aspects. But as far as human loss, right, I came into our dating relationship with a ton of loss. And so I would agree that it's a really good dialogue to have. And for those of you who are out there, we intentionally really didn't have this dialogue at home per se, because I like a lot of the dialogue to unfold with the audience.
Right. Right.
And so as I thought about how we would broach this conversation, there's a couple of graphics that came to mind. So I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I came across a graphic of the stages of grief. And actually, it was the first time that it was more of a continuum. And I know Ben's going to bring this up in a minute. And what I loved about it showing up as a continuum was that it was the first time I had ever seen grief put in a position that there was no start and technically no end and no specific time frame by which things started and ended. It kind of, here's what happens when loss and hurt starts. Here's what it looks like when there's adjustment. And I love the fact that language was adjustment versus like, oh, you're done grieving now. Right. There's a new one that I came across that Ben will show that refers to the cycle of loss, I think. Yes. Yep. And I loved this one for a billion reasons. But the main reason I loved it, besides the fact that it's this tornado effect, and that's exactly how it feels when you experience loss, I love that it really lent more to extending the paradigm, if you will, of what we consider grieving over.
Right.
Because typically when people say loss, the only time you're allowed to grieve, if you're allowed to grieve past 6 months in someone's opinion, is when you've lost a human. But what I loved about this was that it really started to bring some awareness to the fact that loss extends past human life. And believe it or not, the loss of human life, the impact that the loss of human life has on some people are showing up in other ways when they lose other things like jobs.
Sure.
Now, believe it or not, don't laugh. There's this new study out about how the loss of a pet impacts family. Like, I'm shocked. And we are not going to talk about it because I don't want to jinx nothing. But so we don't even speak of.
I would believe it as much as you. So we have this dog that is now 10 years old, and I look at life expectancy, and I am preparing myself. But
we won't continue
don't
this.
Want to have a conversation.
I
about
will not. I will
the fact
not.
that it's 12 years.
Mason will live forever. But also, how people lose jobs, careers, titles. Sure. And so I want to expand the paradigm a bit in this conversation, but I do want to start with human loss, because I think that human loss shows up in how we show up as human beings in much more of a defined way than anybody even realizes, unless this is the area in which you study. Mm-hmm. And I think that you meet the loss that person has had from the time you say hello to them and they're a stranger to the point that you walk down the aisle. And so I'll start with you, and we're going to come back to kind of your current loss. You met me on the heels of one big loss.
Major.
And just the experience of another. So I lost a baby cousin slash younger brother who I literally grew up my entire life with. I want to say, gosh, it was less than a year before we met, and maybe less than a year before we started dating.
Right.
And we tragically lost him. And it was, I hadn't had loss hit our home like that. First of all, we had never tragically had lost hit our family. I lost my grandfather when I was, God, I don't know, 18. And he was the man who raised me every day of my life, right? And so you met me a decade and a half plus some on the other end of that, but I still had a pretty big hole in my heart. How would you say that showed up in a dating relationship? Meeting someone and them having that level of loss in their lives, and that being somebody that you potentially are looking to get to know in an intimate way.
You know, it's interesting because when we started dating, I hadn't experienced loss in that extent. My grandmother had passed away about 20 years before.
So we had that in common.
So we did have that in common, loss of a grandparent.
That was like a parent.
Right. And that still hurts, but it's not a daily impact like it is with the recent loss of my mom. But when we started dating, and I believe that people who have experienced loss have a deeper knowledge of self. Because you have to find some way to build yourself back up. The recent loss of my mom has impacted me in a few different ways. And sure, I could go any way. I have a love for whiskey, but I'm not dwelling in a bottle.
Right.
I'd like to be alone, but I refuse to allow myself to sit alone at times. But so what I think and what I see is that those that have experienced loss, there's a clear understanding and a sense of allyship, if you will, with those that also experience loss, and a higher knowledge of self for those that have experienced loss and those that may have not just yet, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And so I'm curious, how was it? I'm trying to find my words here. Was it hard for you to know how to support that, not having experienced it, right? Because I imagine, right, you are walking into a ghost hero scenario.
Sure.
And so not realizing that you now have to somehow, without it being your responsibility, but you still have to, how do you pay homage to that loss without taking on the burden of that loss in early state, like in early stages?
Sure.
Or even if somebody's marrying somebody, like I know someone who's getting married in a month or so, who's marrying somebody who lost a parent and they didn't know them when they lost the parent. I know that that's a lifelong journey. How does someone walking into that without realizing, what do they not know that they're walking into based on your experience with me?
You know, I remember the anniversary of your brother, cousin's tragic death, and how that was impacting you, and I didn't know. Meaning, I didn't have record of the specific date and the time of year, but I knew it was something that was heavy for you. And that all I could do was offer support because I hadn't experienced but knowing, and I didn't really know where, what to do, what to offer, but just to listen and be there and support during that time.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Because it is loss is like people meet us, when we think about that continuum, people meet us at different intervals in that journey.
Right.
Right. And so I can imagine, right, being married to somebody. And I imagine it's even harder when you weren't there when it happened.
Sure.
So moving forward, in the context of human loss, you mentioned that your father passed away, and whom I did have the opportunity to meet, and loved him too, and saw, where a whole lot of the genes came from. But it's funny, we were at a very different stage in our relationship then. So we were shacking at the time. It was pre-engagement.
I.e. living in sin. That we were.
Oh, anyway, but look, God has a plan, okay?
Right.
Because what if I wasn't there?
Hashtag what if I wasn't there?
But I can remember, on the flip side, as much loss as I had experienced, it did not prepare me to be the significant other of someone who had. Why are you laughing?
Because I'm playing with the table.
Oh, what is that thing on the table? Did you, Lord?
Just
Okay.
keep talking.
Ossie is in here breaking.
It'll be okay.
Shut up. So it did not prepare me to be the significant other of someone who was losing a parent. Mm-hmm. And in your case, I'm sure you don't mind me saying, because you've shared with your social community, it was a loving but complicated relationship because it had a complicated history.
Sure.
As most parental relationships, unfortunately, and particularly paternal relationships, right, with children are. Speaking of which, today's my biological father's birthday. Hey. Speaking of complicated, I remembered that on the way here. So
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, William. What? Ladies and gentlemen,
happy birthday, Daddy William.
When we record after 11, it all apparently goes downhill. Ben, are we not much better in the morning? Or is this the better? I don't know.
This is funnier.
It's funnier, right?
And talking about loss and grief. Okay, we get back on track.
Yeah.
It did not, as much loss as I had, right? And the loss of my grandfather shook my world. Like, I would say, we'll dig into that at a different point in time. But it wasn't until, I'd say, therapy literally in my maybe mid-30s that I had a therapist explain to me that I was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder because I never grieved, because I didn't know how to grieve at 18. And because he was sick first, I apparently do this thing in my mind, right, where I try to protect myself for bracing for impact is what they call it. And in the bracing for impact, you kind of try to numb yourself in the last days. And so when it happens, there's no trigger that says, impact here, you're safe. Even that didn't prepare me for what you were going to experience. And so talk to me about whatever it is that you want to talk about that. But what, as a significant other, living with or not married to, right at that stage, where there was a reinvigorated, connected relationship, but not clearly the same closeness you had with your mom, which we're going to talk about. What did you need then from a partner?
Sure. So my father passed away I'll step back. In 2014, on the eve of Father's Day, I reached out to my father after about a 10-year stint of not communicating, and sort of ignited a relationship that hadn't been there for a while. And during that time, I was blessed during that time to have about 5 years of him and getting to know us our ages. My father passed away at the age of 82, and that those 10 years apart, they hurt because within about a couple years of us regaining or reestablishing a relationship, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And me doing all my research, but really not knowing what stage and thinking it was early stages. And he lived in a different state. And so when I would travel, I would see some of the signs. He would be talking about how Milwaukee looked in the 70s and in the 80s. And I would respond and say, nope, that's not there, that's not there, that's not there. And then it dawned on me and I said, I have to find a way to make him feel comfortable in the place that he's in.
Right.
And at that same time, it gave me an opportunity to really to start the grieving process, if you will. When my father passed away, it wasn't sudden for me, like it was for my mom.
Yeah.
So I had some time to accept the reality that one, he was 82, and two, he had lived a great life, a long life, and that I had gained a friend again, and had some time to reestablish something that wasn't there before he passed away. So it was different when my mom passed.
But I want to go back. What did you need, though, from a partner, right? Like, if I'm being candid.
I didn't need much.
So it's funny you should say that, because I didn't think we were going to make it through that.
Really? I didn't need much. And I think when I say I didn't need much, I remember when my stepmother had called me and told me that he was in his final stages and he was admitted to the hospital and that he had stopped eating. And I rushed to jump on a plane because I really wanted to see him before he passed away, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. But when that happened, I don't think I needed much support at that point.
I think when anybody so I guess the question is then, what do you view as support, right? Because I think weighing it it's not necessarily as far as much, but what is needed, right? Because oftentimes, in particular, when something big happens, and I know for a fact, men typically like to solve. And so they always like to know, typically, what can I do, right? Women aren't much different. But what's challenging, I think, when people lose someone that close, you often see a lot of times the posts that say what you shouldn't do and please stop doing this and please stop doing that. But I think ultimately, sometimes people just don't know what to do. And so I'd love to arm, right, our audience, like, well, what did you need? Because so on your end, right, you say you didn't need much because you had started the process a bit. On the outside, right, I saw a complete shift and change in who you were as a human being and how you were showing up. But I also expected it because you were grieving. And I think that I didn't know how to not make it about me. And by that, before everybody thinks that I'm Cruella DeVille here, I mean that in the aspect of you showed up in all of the uncomfortable ways that tornado showed. And I didn't know how to be there in a way that wasn't to make what we felt feel comfortable. Because to me, that was about me. That wasn't about, well, what does Ozzy need? And so I think I saw a big difference in that stage than I did just recently.
Of course. I think, so going back to your question about what I needed, during that time, I just needed an ear. My father's transition, he wanted to be cremated, so said my stepmom. So I went to Denver for that. refused to go into the specific the crematory.
Yeah, that's not
where
a-
that was happening, and there was some time set aside that would have cost, I believe, maybe $400 for me to set my eyes on him before the process, and said, no, I'm not walking into a crematory to put my eyes on my father at that state, knowing that he had passed away about two weeks or a week and a half before I got there.
I thought it was like days.
Well, when I say, so it was 2 weeks that he was in the hospital, and he was losing weight. And
Understood.
he had stopped eating, and so
So he had gone through a stressful physical process.
I didn't want to
Okay.
see him in that state.
I understand.
And I didn't want to see him in that state after he had passed away.
Got
and
it.
So they had an opportunity to move past that. I moved past that opportunity to set my eyes on, because I wanted to remember him how he looked
Yeah.
the last time I saw him. And so the process was pretty quick. It happened right before Christmas. And I remember on the way back, I felt relieved in the sense that I had had an opportunity to reconnect with my father. But I also felt a void that I could, that may have played out in my knowledge of self.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was it was to benefit in certain ways, like work performance and so forth. But relationship wise, I don't know how that played out. We've never really had that discussion.
I think we haven't, right? Because I don't think I was armed with I wasn't armed with the communication and the emotional skills at that time to address it in a way that I thought was going to be productive and healthy. I mean, that's the short stint of it, right? I now have words to say, hey, I think you were grieving and a bit angry, and probably unaware, because in your mind you had started this process. So in your mind, you're not carrying out these behaviors, and I wasn't in a position, because I was going through my own stuff. I had just left a corporate career that was extremely successful. So I was grieving my own loss of identity. And so I wasn't in the best place to support, I won't say support the way you needed to, but I would say dig into the wounds that I thought were being created. And so my answer, I'll be honest, at that point in time, I just did a lot of praying and spoke to very close friends who had been in my shoes to get advice. And they were helpful. And so speaking of this current loss, and I'm keeping track of time, I can't believe it'll be time to wrap up soon, believe it or not. So I'm going to pause before we move further. Ben and maybe Asi, what say some of the audience? I want to make sure I don't have the device, so I can't read some of the comments.
Sure. So I see Shalita Furlow is on and wanting to acknowledge the sudden loss of her son.
Yeah.
So, glad to have you with us this evening.
Absolutely. And we were
Shalita.
brokenhearted, Shalita, to hear about that.
Stephanie, she said that she lost her mom in 2018 to dementia at the age of 80 and agreed that it's a real rough thing to watch.
I want to say Asi's dad was the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
80, early 80s.
Yeah. Well, maybe he had just turned 80, or was gonna. I think he had, or maybe he was going to. Him and my grandmother are the same age.
Your grandmother's 83.
Yeah.
He was 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember us going to maybe celebrate his, her birthday before we moved in, and he passed that December afterwards. So they both turned 80 on the same day. Anyone else in the comment section, any questions or thoughts before we keep going? And thumbs up, emojis up, emoticons up if the conversation is helpful. Ben, anything else? And I think Ben's on Facebook.
I just have YouTube.
Oh, you have YouTube. Okay.
Mike said my grandmother on my dad's side passed away from Alzheimer's as well in 2015.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's fast forward to now. We're married. And I want to sit here for a minute, but I also want to make sure I leave enough time for a couple of additional topics on the matter. And you've kind of touched on the fact that we have recently lost your mom, which was unexpected. And here we are in our 40s. But what I also thought was that recently there's an uncommon amount of people who are losing their parents, children, and in some cases, siblings and spouses. But I have a lot of friends losing parents that are in my peer group, and that just seems uncommon. And so either we're aging or life is changing. I think I saw a data point on the American Health Journal that said in between 2019 and 2020, 43% of households lost a significant family member. 43%. Can you imagine how hard the world is hurting? 43%. And so we lost your mom, which we didn't see coming. And one day we'll dig deeper into, I think, that topic of sudden loss. And for the sake of this conversation, how is losing a parent as a married individual, what was different about the experience, and how does it show up for you?
So I can talk about losing a parent and specifically losing a mom, which to me is different than when I lost my father. A deeper sense of loss with my mom. My mom and I were buddies. I will always be a mama's boy, and we had a relationship of determination and resilience that is where I get a lot of my strength from. When no one was on my side, my mother was, and so that experience has been a tough. The reality is, my mom had some serious illnesses that I knew she was a fighter, and she had fought for the past maybe 5 years, actually 7, 6. Suffering from, she had a heart condition for the past maybe 25 years. She recently, stage 4 for kidney failure, kidney disease, where she was on dialysis 3 days a week. And I simply knew that she was fighting through it and accomplishing. She had heart surgery within the past couple of years. But it's a deeper sense of loss when you lose your mother. And being married with that loss has given me just to know that there's some support there and some acknowledgement and also some space to grieve the way I need to grieve at any point of the day. I can wake up in the morning and have a thought that brings me to tears. It can happen midday, and then it can also be a feeling of invigoration. Just thinking about specific times and remembering energy to make it through. So it's that's my experience now.
So what does, in that circumstance, interdependent support look like from a significant other and spouse? And I'll explain the interdependentness. So in marriage, they talk about there being three approaches. Well, actually, I think it's in any relationship where you can kind of be here, right, as two individuals. You can be here, which is codependent, which is what we don't want. We didn't want the first one either because that's distance. Or there's this, I think, right, which is interdependence, which is, intimate support with individuality and autonomy at healthy levels. And so what does interdependent support look like? Because I can imagine, so I am now, right, in the club of a few clubs, but in particularly in the club of a spouse who lost a parent, but in particularly a mother. And I guess we could say a spouse who lost a close parent. Because I have some friends where they've lost their dad and it's hit them as hard, right? Depending on the relationship. And it doesn't come with a manual.
Right.
We do not know what to do. And I imagine those of the significant others and the spouses who are out there who are experiencing it or have experienced it. I imagine you were like me and or not like me. I can share, for me, it was tough because I had my own grief, right? I was unusually close with your mother, right? And I say unusual because I think they put such a stigma on in-law relationships. And I know that the term in-love has become popular. But, I called your mom more than I call mine. She'll kill me when I say that now, but mostly because I would be trying to call to ask your mother about something, like something she was supposed to do, some appointment, whatever. And then we would just keep on going. And so, or she would call my phone. She could care less if I didn't answer. She was going to ring these phones until one of us answered. But I had my own pain. But that pales in comparison to seeing the pain that I know that you're in when it happens. And so what does support look like? What, for folks watching who are either living it, haven't lived it yet, or on the other side of it, like what is, because sometimes you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. And what you need today may not be what you need tomorrow. Now, I will say, I think you show up in grief very differently this time around, even though it's deeper. I think that the loss of your father, similar to what you said about my loss, impacted you in a bit of a soul evolution way. And so there's a part of you that shows up in a bit more expressive way, which I think I see you going through these stages, but they show up very differently. I'm also different, right? So what do you, and when I say need, I don't necessarily need tangibly, but what does support look like for a spouse? And anyone in the comment section who's lived through this, feel free to type so we can go ahead and share those as well.
It varies. It varies from day to day, to be quite honest. For me, it's been some days I wake up and just need some space. And you'll see me get up, get out of bed, and just go sit. You probably won't see me because I try to close the door to keep quiet down because you like to get your full 8 hours of beauty sleep.
I mean, it's important. I don't get 8 these days, but I'm normally done working somewhere.
I try to give you 8
right.
at least. But I'll go sit in a quiet space and just be still and sometimes listen. I haven't gotten to the point where I can talk back or hold a conversation with my mom now. I know she's there. But I have gotten comfortable with showing my emotion and not trying to stifle it. I've always been someone who's perceived as being strong. You're so strong. You don't talk, and you just do, and you don't have emotion on your face. And I said I think that has to do with upbringing for men, and just to be in a place where it's okay to cry. I can be sitting in a restaurant and something hits me, and I'll start shedding some tears, and I'm cool with that.
It's interesting you should say that, because one of my concerns is that we're already kind of in a culture that lives in this kind of push through it mentality, right? And especially men, right? We're very gender biased in that way as a culture. I think as a human race, to be honest with you, and I think for each subculture it gets worse. But when you think about the fact that with that push through it mentality, men are currently losing mothers, siblings, children, and jobs, right? But still smiling at happy hour because they're pushing through it, and numbing the pain elsewhere. And so it's interesting that we're having this conversation with you, and you're talking about how much more comfortable you're getting. It poses to the question, and I know we're running on time, and so I'm going to shift in just a second. How do I wrap this and then shift? How are we connecting and healing as a community right now through loss? I mostly see a lot of memes, and I see maybe when someone has some cathartic expression online, but I never really see community events, workshops, seminars, groupings based on connecting through loss. In fact, I was so happy. I was talking to a relative of ours. Well, we were actually talking to a relative of ours, and they were talking about how they attend a support group, and how impactful that is. And that the support group, I think, came out of the funeral home. And so in a community right now where there's all this talk about mental health and awareness, with loss being so prevalent, what do we do? How are we healing together as a community? How do we come out of our homes to connect together?
I think that's an opportunity for and a wide open playing field, if you will, of the community coming together and grieving loss. For those that are grieving, at least for me, and a few people that I know, we tend to close up and try and look within and be within about figuring this out and what's next for me in this new space, and how do I get over that. And so that leaves out everyone else at times. And definitely leaves out your spouse to be in that situation, helping to overcome grief and seeking a grief counselor.
Listen,
I still have it on my list to do because I don't know how to do it.
I mean, I'm here to help, but I'm giving you a little time. So I gotta give you a little space.
Sure.
I mean, and that's fair, right? Because that's also a bit of a lesson in it all, right? Is being mindfully aware of what that is critical. How do we as significant others set the emotional protective guardrails without stifling and shortchanging the cycle process? Right. And so, if I come knocking on your door tomorrow with a list of therapists, I don't think you'll be upset, but what is it interrupting? Right. And so I do think there's this opportunity for us to do a better job and figure out, I don't know who's going to do it, but I do think that someone in the name of community, and I don't think it has to be anything elaborate. I think it can be as simple as somebody saying, I'm going to host a Zoom for people who have lost parents, men who have lost parents in the last year, spouses of those who lost parents, because that's a whole different conversation. And we just going to get on here and we going to talk.
Right, and engaging people who have lost kids.
People who have lost children, and to talk about it. Because here's the thing, you mentioned that as you try to figure out how to do it, it leaves out others.
Right.
That's because that's all you have energy to do right now, is worry about how you get through it, probably in a way that doesn't completely, I'm trying to manage my profanity, like screw up everything around you in a non-sabotaging way. And so that is why community is needed, because that's where the oxygen, the extra space and of grace comes in, where it's the extra strength to say, by the way, guys, when's the last time you sat down maybe with your spouse and said, hey, this is what I thought about today and it hurt, right? And that's why I think it's needed, because it's a lot to manage on our own, for sure.
And just being okay in saying that I'm not okay.
Being okay with saying you're not okay.
And telling people.
And really, I think one of the reasons I push therapists so hard is because not only has it been a life-saving measure for me, but one of the things that it's equipped me with is language for what I feel, and giving me language to say, I'm not okay, but here's what I am.
Right.
And so that allows me to say to somebody like you, no, you're not okay. Let's go to the comments section. Any action there? Any comments? I see a lot of emojis, and we could just read a few out.
Cousin Tamika, Michigan, who recently lost her father. Hearts go out to you, and I see it. She just said yes.
Yes.
With exclamation points. So,
yes. And Tamika, I was actually referring to you about the support group.
Right.
When we talked about that over them grilled veggies at Elsa's. Who else do we have in the comments section?
Jamie in New York says, hey, y'all.
Hey, Dame.
And there's a whole story about him and his partner.
We're not going to do this.
On our wedding day.
We are going to stay
after our wedding,
on topic and not talk about the gummies. So before we wrap up, on the topic of loss, you have one more comment you're going to share?
Nope.
Okay. Ben, what about in your corner?
Yeah, we've got a couple. Felicia Kinsey says, my hubby lost his mother 25 years ago, and till this day, he will have an emotional break, and I've learned to just say, I know, I'm here, then give him space that I know he needs. And Stephanie Lucas said that she would love to host a Zoom for women who have lost their children, because she's experienced that.
Listen, y'all heard that. Stephanie, I'm happy to use my page to help you create that forum. Because I think it's so needed. And for anyone on this line who wants to create a forum, I'm happy to partner with you to create the page. And I'll show up whatever it is that you need me to help do. I'm happy to, because I think it needs to be done. And somebody needs to tell us we don't need a flyer for it. We don't, it'd be great if we had a clinical, therapist decide that they want to write. But guess what? We don't need that either.
No.
We don't need the kitchen and coffee table of our parents' generation still work. It's just our job to take it a step further. I think part of the reason that our parents and our grandparents and our ancestors there are reasons I think that they dismissed therapy, but a lot of it was because they weren't introduced to it. But I also believe it's because they created therapeutic community. It wasn't that in every single case they, kind of addressed it with blinders. Sometimes they did. But sometimes they ran to the coffee table, which is actually, believe it or not, the real reason it's called Coffee and Grace, because it's community and grace, and that we have to start this grace within ourselves first. As we wrap up here, I want one more topic that I want to talk about. When we talk about loss, one grief that isn't typically discussed is one that comes with the loss of a chapter in life, meaning singleness, pre-parenthood, marriage, career, etc. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about it today, because I am convinced that a lot of downward spiral paths of depression, are really individuals who can't put label and words to feeling out of sorts in the season that they actually asked for. Right? So, it's not until literally the last month of my 41-year-old, actually not the last month of my 41-year-old life, but last month, that I realized that they kind of left this out of the, look out for this shit book. Right? Like, no one put that in. I feel like there are topics that people are like, hey, it's in the book that's called Look Out for That. Right? There's this indescribable emotion and heaviness that I've experienced on the other side of every season I prayed for. And I haven't been able to put words to it until now. I couldn't figure it out when whether it was relocation, job promotion, all the things. And the biggest has been in the last year of my life. And there's a ton of great things that's happened. And it realized sitting down, sharing with others, and of course with mental health experts. And it hit me, you tend to grieve the life that you had before, and that's okay. That something happened. So for instance, we're married. This marriage is everything I've prayed for and more. It doesn't change the fact that I'm no longer Deirdre Copeland. And I don't care how we spin it and how, two become one and you still your individual and all of that and blah, 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 blah. I still, under God and the state of Wisconsin, connected in covenant with another human being that legally and spiritually ties me to them, who I was, literally and figuratively, no longer exist. Like Deirdre Copeland no longer exists. I am Deirdre Kendricks, and I now need to figure out who am I now in this space with these new roles. And so I think sometimes when people say they get lost and they've lost themselves in parenthood or marriage, I won't say that they didn't lose themselves. I think it's because no one told us that it's going to hurt to get what you want still. You can equally be so happy and excited about what you now have, at the same time be mournful. I spent 40 years with her, right? And as far as single, right, 20 plus, whatever, 30, whatever, however we want to count those from the age of consent, whatever. I don't know what we want to count those years from, but
20 plus. Right.
That's all we'll go with. But, for instance, a good example is I love being home with you. I equally mourn not being able to be by myself whenever I want.
Agreed. And I think it's this past year and a half have made it a little bit more easier and difficult, if you will.
Yeah.
The pandemic brought us together and kept us together in the house working for a year.
This was the pandemic. This was us.
And so it's easy to get lost or forget or struggle to figure out who you are.
Yes.
In any given moment. I think we took when was that? Was that February of this year that you went to New Orleans with a friend and I went
something
to
like that. February.
Austin with a couple friends.
Yes.
And it was maybe the first time we were in two different places since the pandemic and
Agreed.
Since we had gotten married. And really had some time to kind of figure out or reconnect with ourselves.
Yeah. And I still didn't because I was with a friend.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
But that only means that we connect differently, right? Like I thrive through solitude, right?
Sure.
And part of that I think comes from the fact that although I have siblings and cousins that I was raised with, there's such drastic age differences and people living in different states and all of that. I primarily was raised as this only child, right, around older adults. And so I got very comfortable being alone. And so that's always my kind of bounce back place. However, this reality hit me these days. You're going to have to figure out something else, sister, right? Like, it doesn't mean that I won't still have to sit with you and figure out how I still get that alone time and refuel time. Right. But I'm also going to have to adjust to the fact that was that season. Listen, I now understand, not to pull out this scripture, okay, why the Bible says it is better to be single. And I used to think that was like something they said to people to make them feel better about being single. And, and I believe Paul says it. What I realize is it's not necessarily that it's that it's better to be single, but it's you won't know what you had until you no longer have it in singlehood.
Sure.
Because there's growing and shifting and human growth. It was easier to grow as a human by myself than it is with another human in the household. And one would say that shouldn't make a difference. It makes all the difference. And I now realize I was naive. And it has nothing to do with the other person and what they do and don't do. It has everything to do with the fact that you are a different. So imagine what parents, men and women, are going through when they're now adding children to that equation, and now they have to add a role and title of mother and father
right.
on top of husband and wife. Right. When they move from, boyfriend to girlfriend to fiance, or when parents have children that go off to school and that title changes and that need and dependency. And so I really just wanted to, before we wrap up, like, is there anyone out there that, number one, feels what I'm talking about? Number two, pay some intentional attention to how you feel when you get what you've asked for, and you kind of try to figure out why you're so excited in the moment, and then months later you feel like you're being ungrateful. And it's not that you're being ungrateful, it's that now you have to figure out what's next, and the body has to go through a mourning experience.
We have some comments.
Yes, I'm here for it.
So Kim Burley Marie says that's a good idea, Deirdre, regarding the kind of the community grief space creating.
Shout out to Lux.
Right. Heavenly Harris, Soror, says prayer, space, and resources, and that she needs to get busy, and work has consumed her. Therapy referrals have increased significantly due to the pandemic, and she has to put some goals on hold, but she's willing to help.
I was going to say, Heavenly, that mean not going to help us?
She also says her husband just lost his brother, so she can relate to this. And she, in addition, at the age of 11, she lost her mom. And they lost their son 13 years ago.
Oh, my goodness.
In her words, grief doesn't end, but we've learned how to cope.
You know, I'm glad that you said that, because I think that is, it's interesting. Sometimes people come and they ask me how you're doing, right? And I say to them, I think he's doing as good as he possibly can be, right? Which is code for me saying, I don't need to call in any reinforcements, right? But I also say to them, my prayer is simply that he and you, me saying he, in this space, connects with his relationship with grief, because it's never, ever going away. Right. And I've learned that when you build a relationship with it, then you all learn how to treat each other. And so you get to this point where it doesn't control, right? But it just gets easier.
Right. Couple more comments. Nancy Yarbrough. The transformation and metamorphosis has been a real experience, from being in that single space to getting married place. So I feel you. I love you both. I love both places. I'm just learning how to adjust the space.
Girl, me too. Okay. And you may have a year or so on top of me. I am learning. Maybe that's a separate show, right? How do we adjust? And I'm interested and intrigued to know how do men adjust? Because it is a huge adjustment. And I think it's more popular that it's talked about that it's an adjustment for men than it is women.
Right.
I think because we Hollywoodize and glamorize, right, marriage and women walking down an aisle.
And then we know mom is watching. She has noted Uncle Derek losing children or loss in violence.
Yeah. How you lose folks, I think, matters. And so we did. So she's referring to my brother and cousin who we lost, God, tragically. And I'll try not to completely fall apart here. And it's been over 5 years now. Or has it been 5? It's been, I think this was year 6 because it happened in 2015. I thought it was 2014. I had just moved to Wisconsin. And speaking of support, like I had no support. Like I remember getting the phone call at 4 a.m. and immediately just calling my boss, like, can we postpone us meeting up at this branch today? And just casually. And I went into work because I didn't know anything else to do because I didn't have anyone there at home to tell me to do differently, right? So this has been probably a heavy topic, but also I think a critical topic. And that is what the coffee table, right, is for.
Right.
It is to start the brave conversations that aren't happening in public forums that are going to bring us connectedness. And because all of this, when we get back to the very first topic of leveling up, all of this stuff has to be dealt with.
Exactly.
We really can't level up through this. Well, actually, we can. What we can't do is thrive through it.
Exactly.
And so this is part of the reason. If anybody's out there like, why the hell is she always having these damn hard conversations? Like, we really just won't laugh a little. It is because I am, relentless about seeing folks not get their dreams, but thrive in their dreams. And from the seat that I sit in, either in my career or what I do professionally in life strategy and coaching folks, it breaks my heart to see folks brokenhearted and in despair at the top of their mountain.
Right. And it's okay. You got to throw in some laughter with the tears.
You have to.
You have to.
You absolutely have to. And so why not bring your tears to the table so we can talk about it as a community and laugh? Because, ain't no telling what's going to come out of me and Asi mouth. Well,
Right,
Asi's looking
right,
like I've only got him for one episode. So I'm going to have to, we going to speak me and Ben after this.
I'm the mild one, to be honest. I'm the mild one.
Mild how?
I say less.
When?
Most of the time.
Here we go back to this context.
Most of the time.
Okay? That's like the I didn't need much. Just you to be perfect.
Of course.
Most of the time. I mean, I think I have more words to say.
Men always need more, if that makes sense.
They do in different ways. I am, one of my favorite things about being married is learning the male species in a different way, up close and personal. And it's funny because we are, oh my God.
My famous up close and personal. That's this.
We are, oh my God. Men and women are as different as they are alike. And, but what's funny is if we take some time to really connect in the difference, we'll find that where you all are different is actually a beautiful thing, and likewise. We've been taught that difference, we're always thrown off by the tension of difference because difference feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And so the minute our, sensory load just overloads, we just, kind of displace it as they're different, blah, blah, blah. but we should lean into that more. It's made me a better communicator, I think.
Sure.
It's made me more patient. I remember growing up, my grandmother used to say, which probably wasn't the most encouraging words, but she would say, whatever you do in life, don't become a teacher and don't have no kids too early because you're just the most impatient child I've ever met.
And then they become adults.
And
I get it.
And I am an impatient adult. Very much so. Why do you think I have to be a grace warrior? Anyway, okay, we're well over time.
Well over.
Let's closing comments. Ben, anything? And then Asi, we're going to go to you to closing comments.
Yeah, Keisha Highshaw says, please save this segment on YouTube.
We
and
will.
then Samuel Copeland says, love you, brother, and Lil Sis.
Oh, Sam. Hey, that's my big brother, guys.
Yeah.
Sam gave me away.
Chandra Deneen, our friend in Houston, says bigger for men. Kimberly Marie says you got to come back, Asi, and I am. Next week, I think next week ends our Love and Marriage series, July series at least. Nancy Yarbrough, the loss of my mother has been a total adjustment. Sometimes I attempt to grasp to the things I remember good, great, not so good, could have been better, and still hear the voice of wisdom and life lessons. Thank you for this space of realness. Thank you, Nancy, for joining us.
Absolutely.
Tamira says difference, that's good. Thanks. Shout out to Tamira.
Shout out to Delectable Delicious Bites.
Delicious Bites.
DDBT
My
and
DDBT.
yes. And I forgot
We're
what
gonna get it right.
Distinctive Design.
Yes.
Listen,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Gretchen, you can learn from the differences. Shout out to Gretchen in Milwaukee.
Listen, Gretchen could give a whole class on wifehood, okay? Because she masters this thing.
Right. Kimberly Marie, again, this has been an amazing discussion. Thank you. And Heavenly Harris also says great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
both. We love the tribe and the community.
Right.
And thank y'all for hanging out with us in the evening. Also, let us know in the comment box after we leave. Do you want this Do you want this format more often? We're happy to shift to a couple of evening lives, but we just need to know. We're still in that stage where we're figuring out what y'all want. And so we want to cater to you all. And thanks to Ben for just being, he is the best. So with that, y'all were the last sip.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
That was it. There will be, so the morning sip, if you haven't checked out right here on the YouTube channel, check out, there's a part 1 and a part 2 around the production team that you need for your life. We're talking about being the superhero of your life and showing up as your own superhero. And we're talking about ways to assess, but also I'm giving the answers along the way. Check that out. It'll be there. And you'll have time to check it out because there won't be a new one tomorrow. This will be saved and uploaded Friday, right, Ben?
Yes.
The same. So Friday, we love you all. So as you go with your weeks, be bold, be authentic, and most importantly, be gracious. Thanks for joining Coffee and Grace live stream edition.
Bye.
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 Thank you for joining the conversation. It was such a privilege to have you. We hope that you would keep joining the conversations. Meet us over at our social media where there's always a Coffee and Grace conversation happening.